Welcome to another edition of Radio InfoSide. I'm coming in late here. I'm trying to get myself organized, and if you already heard my spiel about that, if you were here a little early, sorry about that. Give me just a minute to kind of close things down here. But hopefully we'll have Michigan Bob join in here shortly. So anyway, tonight, the topic. And why are we doing the topic? We're doing a topic on the Arab Spring, and the reason why I feel this is important is just because it looks like we're going to attack another country, this time Syria. We've been attacking Syria covertly for a long time. And we're kind of being sold a bill of goods, I think, on all this stuff. What we're being told is these revolutions and everything are all kind of organic. They're just happening. People were fed up and repressed. And after the fall of the Soviet Union, when the U.S. had no more reason to... where's Michigan Bob? He's muted. You should be unmuted now. How are you tonight, Michigan Bob?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Oh, not bad. A little disorganized. Sorry for changing the topics on you like 50 times.
No, not a problem.
I was just getting into talking about how, well, first of all, before I blab, what's your take on the whole Arab Spring? What's your spin on it?
Well, it's kind of confusing, and I actually took a little bit of time when I found out what the topic was today. I was at a party of sorts, and I actually got a chance to talk to some different people that aren't very politically active, I guess you'd say, and I asked them, what their opinion of it and it was, and a lot of people basically they have no idea what this so-called Arab Spring is. They think it's a I don't know. There was a lot of wide varieties of what people out there think, and to me, it kind of was my take on it from the media's perspective is it was this great movement in the Middle East to basically overthrow regimes and to bring in democracy, and that's just the basic understanding that I had before. But I mean, to me, that's what I was told what it was.
I would say that's generally what everyone thinks about it, is that it's kind of this organic movement that just sprung up. I guess people were just getting sick of being repressed, and then all these new media tools like Twitter and Facebook came up where people that were younger, that were oppressed, could communicate with each other and could organize better, and so they all kind of got together and started to have this Arab Spring and overthrow all these corrupt and oppressive regimes that the U.S. wasn't supporting so much anymore because the Cold War was over. At least that's kind of my initial spin on it. Does that sound roughly like kind of what you were hearing too?
Well, yeah, that's, like I said, my basic understanding of what it was before I really started looking into it and doing some more of my own research. But just going on what people that I talked to today is, I think I talked to 10 or 15 different people and asked them their opinion on it. And like I said, everybody kind of gave this generic, watered down, it's this great political grassroots movement that, like you said, a lot of people brought up, I heard that, it's because of Twitter, and that was they were able to communicate all the different, individual people could communicate to form a rally, and it's this great political uprising in the Middle East to bring in democracy and to overthrow regimes that, are crooked and rebellious and stuff like that. And it just, like I said, people, almost everybody gave kind of the same answer, kind of the same talking points almost.
The CNN talking points, the mainstream media talking points.
Exactly.
Yeah, the talking points given by the regime, the deep state, to disseminate through the controlled mass media down to the masses. I hate to put it that way. That's kind of what it is. Well, Michigan Bob, do you think we'd be talking about this tonight if that was maybe all there was to the Arab Spring?
No, I don't think so.
All right, let's look at this a little bit more in depth. For sake of brevity, I'll try to use a big word. The train.
Sorry.
No problem. For the sake of brevity, I'm going to skip the definition of the Arab Spring. If you go to the notes, and I've got some great links in the notes, so if you're listening to this live or in the archive, I highly encourage you to check out the notes. I'm going to pimp our show again on social media real quick here. Why the train goes by. Oh, man, I'm so glad I don't live next to a train anymore. We had this one guy, and he just hated the yuppies in the town that I lived in, so when he cruised through at 3 o'clock in the morning, he would just blare it on every night. People would complain. There was this whole war. The local police actually tried to give tickets to the trains. It was crazy, but I digress. Let me give out one more shout to the show here. So I hope people call in if you're listening, streaming. Trying to make the show interactive, so we'd love it if you join us. But if you're content to listen on streams, that's fine too. All right, so I mentioned to you, did you get a chance to find that Wesley Clark video?
Yes, yeah, I actually got a chance to watch. There was a couple of videos I found when I looked up, but I did watch the one that the link was for.
Excellent. I'm going to play a little bit, and we're going to play it Ghetto Fabulous here because I don't have the technology all set up like I should. But I'm going to play it through my mic. I'm going to play about 2 minutes. And afterwards, I'll just go directly and get your take on it. So let's give this a shot, and hopefully I won't mess things up too bad. All right. Or I will mess things up too bad. Hang with us, audience. This is Indie Radio. This is live. All right. I'll start about right here. Like I said, I won't be able to listen while this is on. So here you go, and then I'll jump back in. It'll go for about a minute and a half.
Downstairs, I was leaving the Pentagon, and an officer from the Joint Staff called me into his office and said, I want you to know, he said, sir, we're going to attack Iraq. And I said, why? He said, we don't know. He said, I said, well, did they tie Saddam to 9/11? He said, no. He said, but I guess they don't know what to do about terrorism, and so they think, but they can attack states, and they want to look strong, and so I guess they think if they take down a state, it will intimidate the terrorists. And you know, it's like that old saying. He said, if the only tool you have is a hammer, then every problem has to be a nail. Well, I walked out of there pretty upset. And then we attacked Afghanistan. I was pretty happy about that. We should have. And then I came back to the Pentagon about 6 weeks later. I saw the same officer. I said, why haven't we attacked Iraq? We still going to attack Iraq? He said, oh, sir. He says, it's worse than that. He said, he pulled up a piece of paper off his desk. He said, I just got this memo from the Secretary of Defense's office that says we're going to attack and destroy the governments in 7 countries in 5 years. We're going to start with Iraq, and then we're going to move to Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran.
All right. Hopefully that didn't sound too bad. What's your thoughts, Michigan Bob?
He didn't give the dates for that when he was talking there. I don't remember the exact date, but it might be helpful if you told everybody the date that he said those comments on.
Oh, shoot. I should have wrote it down. I think it was right after, sometime shortly after September 11th.
Yeah, I thought it was in December of 2011 or 01. I can't remember the exact date, but yeah, it'd be useful to know, what timeline he was talking in. I mean, this wasn't recently. This was right after 9/11, and he basically came out and said that the government had a plan to take out these state government, and it's interesting. The states that he said are all part of this Arab Spring.
Yep, and good point about the date. He does mention that it was before Afghanistan. I think if I went to the beginning of the video, he does tell when he was in there. But again, for brevity in the videos and the notes, I'll just skip that for now. But yeah, I mean, this is indicative that there was at least a plan in place for, notice how he says, destroying the governments of 7 countries, and it doesn't necessarily say it would always be through military force or direct crushing. So this to me is indicative that there might have been a plan in place that the Arab Spring might actually be this plan being carried out. What do you think, Michigan Bob?
It's very interesting. It's very possible. It definitely would have to be a how would I say, a backwater channels to do this the way that it's happened. But it definitely kind of corresponds with what he was saying, that if you take him at his word, what he was shown and what he was told and when he was told it, and it's definitely interesting that it's everything that he said.
Yeah, well, let's connect some more dots here. If the Arab Spring really is a covert, or at least partially controlled by Western intelligence agencies to destabilize a lot of the leftover Arabic regimes, and I'll be honest and upfront here, the one big question that I'm unable to answer about all this, assuming that theory is true, is the why. I can speculate, and we will speculate a little bit, but the grand scheme, the end game of the Arab Spring eludes me for the moment. Any comments there, Michigan Bob?
To basically state my point of view, I at this point, I'm more of the opinion that it how can I say without ruining the show? I kind of lean towards it. It's not I don't think we really had anything to do with it to begin with. I mean, I know, well, I can't say I know, but there's definitely flags that get raised to say that we have been involved in certain things going on over there. But I guess I'm naive or stupid or whatever you want to say, but I kind of believe that this did start as a grassroots movement, and that, the people over there did it themselves and started the whole movement. Like I said, there's lots of proof that we have been involved in different areas, and even I think our government has admitted that they've been doing different things over there to encourage or discourage or to help or to hinder certain people and help other people. But I think I kind of want to say that I believe that it's not a government secret plan. However, it definitely could be.
I would say you're how would I put it? You're saying it's everything's organic, like the movement's evolved out of frustration.
Yeah,
and stuff like
I
that.
think it definitely started out that way. Now, like I kind of believe that we have had our hand in there. I mean, I don't think you can really deny that we have, been involved over there in different areas, and obviously some very shady deals that have gone down over there that we were linked to. But I definitely want to say that, the whole movement was started by those people. Again, though, it brings up interesting points that here's a guy basically saying that the government told him, or certain people in the government told him, that they were going to take out these regimes in a certain time block, and come to find out, it's almost right as he said it was going to be.
It's very interesting. Let's dive in a little deeper, and maybe I can change your mind a little bit. Let's see. If this was going to be some kind of covert war, there's typical elements that tend to pop up in covert type wars. One of those elements is using non-government organizations that are often called CIA front groups to influence people in the regimes that you wish to change. And so I started looking for evidence of that, and I found some. Ron Nixon of the New York Times talks about NGOs, often with government ties, used to train youth to use social media tools for change. though they deny that change meant regime change. And I linked to an article in the New York Times, and here's a quote. A number of the groups and individuals directly involved in the revolts and reforms sweeping the region, including the April 6th youth movement in Egypt, the Bahrain Center for Human Rights, and grassroots activists like, I won't even attempt his name, a youth leader in Yemen, received training and financing from groups like the International Republican Institute, the National Democratic Institute, and Freedom House, a nonprofit human rights organization based in Washington. According to interviews in recent weeks and American diplomatic cables obtained from WikiLeaks, not the best source. Also from WikiLeaks, again, not the best source. Some of the, I guess there was a counter-terror operation that happened, and U.S. captured some bad guys. The American forces captured some bad guys, and one of them was using a phone number that belonged to the BBC. And again, there's links to both these incidences in the notes. And the more disturbing one beyond the phone is that a lot of the youth in all of these countries were trained on how to use Twitter, social media, and all that by NGOs, which is pretty common for covert warfare. Any comments there, Michigan Bob?
I don't know how far the training go. You said they trained them in how to use Twitter and stuff, but I guess you could argue that doesn't every teenage kid know how to use Twitter?
I think the training was specifically on how to organize to promote change in their societies.
Okay, okay. I kind of want to make it clear that this wasn't just they trained them how to use social media. This is a lot more in depth than that. It wasn't, they didn't just bring these people in and said, okay, this is Twitter, this is how you use it. This was a organized thing where they showed them how to organize large groups of masses, basically.
I think they hem and haw. Like, they don't want to come out and admit that. Like in the article, I skimmed through it, they talked about, but, oh, no, this wasn't for regime change, but yet they're teaching them how to use social media tools to organize. So I think that there could be an overt stated reason why this happened, but yet there could be a covert stated reason. Just separating out people talk from what happened, we have non-government organizations coming in, training activists, and then those activists returning to their host societies, starting revolutions. It's an interesting point. Let's see. What other? There would also be a training and leadership component. Here's a little link here. Pentagon Islamic advisor reappears as political leader for Syrian Muslim Brotherhood-dominated group. This was just one article about how people in the U.S. were trained and then suddenly pop up in other countries. This happened with Libya. There was a guy who was he had his address in Langley, Virginia, right next to the CIA, and all of a sudden he pops up as this major, I don't have this in the notes, so people listening, you'll have to be a brain and check this out, but he pops up as a leader of the so-called rebels fighting in Libya. So there does seem to be a covert effort, whether it's a case-by-case basis or some kind of master plan to train leadership of the rebels and then return that leadership back to the host company so they can start fighting. Any comments there, Michigan Bob?
It's very interesting. Like I said, it wasn't in the note. I don't know about that one.
Yeah. And then another example is some of the big leadership like El Baradi from Egypt, who is the vice president of Egypt, who recently just stepped down. It looks to be like he's like a total New World Order stooge. I wish I could have researched him more, but I remember, and again, you'll have to be a brain on this, he's got ties to a British family that's worth millions, if not billions of dollars. He was educated in all the elite schools. He's been used in all these various organizations. He was even in charge of the atomic, forget what it's called, the whatever atomic watchdog group that decides if Iran's really building nuclear weapons or not, and he continuously stonewalled and said that they weren't. So he's one example. There's other examples of leadership that has hidden or covert Western ties that are being pushed into positions of prominence in the host societies. Any comments there, Michigan Bob?
Again, it definitely looks like the dots are starting to line up.
All right. Another thing is the CIA and State Department allegedly consulted right around the time that all these, Arab Springs started to happen. Peter Ackerman, which wrote a book called A Force More Powerful, and he's an expert on what they call nonviolent resistance, or NVR, which in previous incarnations of our CIA's and State Department's efforts to manipulate things would be called destabilization of countries. I've got a link to his book in the notes, and apparently he kind of laid out a lot of the, again, working with those NGO organizations, how, it's almost like his book is the game plan, and then you look at how these revolutions or movements have unfolded. They're using a lot of Ackerman's techniques, almost like they read the book or were trained on them. And again, that's just me talking. People, including you, Michigan Bob, will have to, if interested, research that a little bit more. But there's another fingerprint of the State Department on all this. Any comments there?
Again, it's interesting to see how everything lines up, and to see how different people play in different roles, and if they are basically, it sounds like they're strategically placing certain people in different roles to basically get the ball rolling, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, light the match. So what the why? I talked about the why. Like, if this was a covert op, you should be able to kind of tie it into America's interest or the Western interest at large. And there's specific instances like the French, our good friends, the French. They're a little bit less able to hide their greed and their motives. Here's a couple headlines about them, why they were so interested in intervening in Libya. Libya in the way of French envisioned Mediterranean EU. Libya had the water and Western powers wanted, and that goes to Libya had this huge aquifer system that can, give water and help raise crops for a huge chunk of not only Libya but Africa and that whole region. I guess that aquifer system is really valuable. So some people speculate that the French had an interest in that because they're still operating colonially in the Mediterranean and in Africa, their former colonies. Goldman Sachs still stole $1 billion from Libya. Goldman Sachs was all over Libya. So was the Carlyle Group, another shady group that isn't in the limelight as much as Goldman Sachs is, or J.P. Morgan, or any of those guys. But they're all over the international community. In fact, George Bush Sr. was having a meeting with Osama bin Laden's father in the Carlyle Group headquarters, or it was part of a Carlyle Group thing, when 9/11 happened. And after they stopped all air traffic, one of the few planes that was allowed to fly was the plane that took Osama bin Laden's father out of the U.S. Had you heard that before, Michigan Bob?
I think you've mentioned that in previous shows. Okay.
So shady groups in there, and I guess Goldman Sachs had a lot of money loaned out to Libya, or Libya had invested a lot of money in Goldman Sachs, something like that. It's in the article. And when the Libyan regime changed, all that money just all those debts just got ripped up, forgotten. Oh, where'd they go? Another thing about Libya, Michigan Bob, if you were invading a country, or let's say you were, this is speculative, so I don't expect you to, give a award-winning answer or anything, but let's just say you were a rebel and you wanted to overthrow a tyrannical government. What would be like maybe 2 goals that you would immediately do?
To overthrow a government, what would I do?
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't have to be that great of an answer. Talk something about that.
I guess. I mean, I would try to, like you said, it like a grassroots movement. I guess you try to affect the masses with propaganda.
Okay. Let's say you're a Libyan rebel and you're fighting against Gaddafi. I'll give you two things that probably wouldn't be on your top 10 list. Would you immediately start a centralized bank for your rebel group and an oil company? Would those be like two things that you were top on the list?
Probably not.
Probably not. I would say probably not. But guess what the Libyan rebels did? They immediately, before the fighting even really got going, established a central bank and an oil company. Sounds a little suspicious to me. And I'd look for those Western power connections there. I didn't research that so much. So, how you feeling about the organic approach? Still,
again, it'd be interesting to. What's that?
No wrong answer.
I would like to say that again. I do believe it's. I just don't like you. The big question is why. I mean, like you said, when I was doing research on this, I was trying to rack my brain as to why would we want to do this? Why would our government? Why would any government want to basically start a revolution in all these different countries and try to prod it along? And I've never heard a real good answer on why we would do it or why any other government would do it other than the generic, again, when I was asking other people, a lot of people who said, when I asked, do you think the U.S. government is involved, a lot of people said because of oil. And, I mean, that just seems to be the generic answer for anything that happens in the Middle East is, we're just over there for oil. We're trying to do it for oil. And the more you look into it, it's obviously, I don't think that kind of lines up with what's going on in oil, but at least not in the generic form. I'm sure you probably know a couple inside information that has to do with big oil or something like that. But I don't see why our government would do it or what would be the benefits of it.
This is something I rack my brain with too, and I think that just the generic weak answer of oil, I think with take Iraq in particular, the U.S. actually didn't get a whole lot of oil from Iraq, and we still don't. Most of it goes to other countries. Actually, a lot of it's going to China, which kind of disgusts me. We went in and, spent trillions of dollars and a bunch of lives and treasure, including a whole bunch of Iraqi lives. And then the people who reaps the rewards of that are the French, the British, the Germans, and the Chinese. So I think when people use the oil argument, a lot of the times that they really look at it, is the U.S. actually getting oil from the regions they're talking about? Sometimes we are. Most of the times it's in a small amount, if anything. The argument could be made that the U.S. is controlled and we act as like this Hessian mercenary force for the world. So we go out and protect oil for other countries, like, say, France. There was a ton of oil in parts of Libya, which was actually one of the first areas to secede. But the larger grand scheme, I've heard conspiracy theories from Lindsey Williams talking about this is all eventually going to even take down Saudi Arabia, and all the money that we owe all these countries will, disappear, and it's going to lead to this giant war, which is part of the plan to create the New World Order and all this stuff. But that's all highly speculative and conspiratorial. I'm not seeing any kind of connect the dots like you're saying to those theories.
Again, obviously, if we're going at this as a certain conspiracy type of thing, obviously not all the dots are going to be there because that's the point. It's hidden. You're not going to be able to find the answer. That's kind of where I was questioning the whole thing is, what are we getting out of this that isn't so obvious, or that you can't see, that's not obvious enough for, just your average Joe Schmo with a computer to research? That's kind of where I'm going. If we're involved, why? I mean, there's got to be a reason why, and obviously there's enough evidence that kind of points to us being involved. and so that's kind of where I'm at is, okay, what's the big picture, and what aren't we seeing? That's kind of, the questions that I have.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's a question that I don't think we can answer.
Yeah.
So this show's pointless. I guess the goal of the show, and welcome guest 3, we have an actual guest. Hello. The reason why I wanted to do the Arab Spring tonight is it really looks like we're going to do military intervention into Syria really soon. And you heard about all the recent chemical attack a couple days ago, did?
Yeah, it's been all over on every news media basically.
So now we've got Obama ordering warships closer to the Syrian border. Syria is an interesting test case because, again, it shows our involvement. Linking in the notes, before I go there, let me just circle back with my point. But, I'm attempting to show with this show that there is more to the Arab Spring than it just being an organic or organic movements in all these countries to destabilize the regime. I think that it's kind of like Wesley Clark was saying. I think there was a plan, and our fingers are all over this. There's a couple more things we're going to talk about to try to convince you of that. But again, the whole end game, what is the end game? I just can't figure that out. It doesn't make any sense. But it looks like we're going to go for the next domino. We're going to finally get at Syria. And we've been trying to get at them since 2005, and there's been some interesting geopolitical back and forth stopping Western societies from jumping in, which we'll get into. But I just want people to maybe wake up to the fact that this might be more than just, a bunch of Arab regime people that are sick of their governments. And so when the Syrian war ends that we're about to get into, maybe we could start calling some of our civil servants to account and saying, hey, what are you guys doing? What is the end game in all this? Don't give us your BS that this is all organic. The evidence shows that it's not. What are you up to? So that's kind of the mission of the show. Go for it.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, now, do you think that this is the long route around to get to Saudi Arabia or even to China, and trying to, if you knock down enough of the cards in a house made out of cards, the whole thing kind of falls. And so they had to strategically take out different countries to get to the big guys that, everybody thinks that we're after. So like I said, Saudi Arabia and China.
That's the rumor, but the only thing is in the wake of all these regime changes, it seems like the governments that are taking over are less apt to cooperate with us and more apt to cooperate with China.
Exactly. That again, when you look at how things are shaping up, it's definitely not going the way that you would think if you believe in the conspiracy theory aspect of it, that it's not shaping up the ideal situation.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, with Libya, well, Libya is maybe a bad example, but Egypt, I mean, we had a puppet in there who was not the greatest guy by any means and was oppressive to his people, but he kept things kind of under wraps. And, the Arab Spring comes in, U.S. trained provocateurs, I can't talk tonight, go in there. And actually, I got some more information on that real quick. Let me pop down to there in my notes if I can find it. There's an article, PSYOPs use Twitter sock puppets and hashtag Iran election to destabilize Iran. That was more concerning to Iran. I think that's what I was talking about. But a similar thing happened in Egypt. But anyway, I'm losing my train of thought here. It totally backfired. I think that our goal is to get the Islamic Brotherhood in there. I don't really know why. That seems like a step backward, and then the secularists decide, screw this, and they attack they kick them out. Now it's a big giant civil war in a cluster. So how does that help us?
Yeah.
I don't get it. Yeah. So maybe it's just that this is total incompetence. This was kind of like this grand plan that a lot of effort went into, and it totally jumped the shark and derailed.
I can definitely, again, I can definitely see that if we did kind of invoke this or prod it along, and you can't control certain variables in an equation, especially when you're dealing with people. And I would tend to believe, if you want to go the route that we were more involved than we've admitted, that I think things just kind of they're getting out of hand.
I think that might actually be what reality is. That I think this really is a mop up of all these regimes after the Cold War ended and after we got ticked off at 9/11. We're like, yeah, we're going to go in and mop all these guys up, but it's totally going wrong. But another thing I don't understand is once it starts going wrong, why aren't they like regrouping and maybe stopping the plan? It seems like the dominoes are still falling just as they should be, even though they aren't being replaced by the right dominoes. I don't get it.
Well, maybe maybe by regrouping you would almost make more evidence that you're the one stacking the dominoes. If all of a sudden things just totally change and aren't going the same way, obviously that's going to raise a lot of suspicion.
That could be it.
Or this is exactly how they wanted to go.
That's scary.
Or it is an organic movement, and it just, like I said, I definitely think that we've prodded it along more, but is it just something that happened organically? It is odd that all these different countries are basically happening at the same time, and obviously there's a human effect where if your neighbor country takes down their oppressive leader, you're like, hey, we can do that here, and it just starts a chain reaction. I can definitely see that. How probable is that? I don't think that's very probable, but again, I guess I'm kind of two-minded on the issue. I like I said, I kind of want to think that it was just a organic issue, but it kind of, the points you brought up kind of show that it might not be.
Well, obviously the Libya one, I mean, there might have been a little bit of organic. To our listeners, when we say organic, that means that a legitimate internal group rising up to overthrow the oppression in their country. It might have started, but then we went in with NATO and blew the crap out of everybody. I mean, that wasn't organic.
No. And again, you brought it up too, is that there is a lot of innocent people that are getting killed and getting tortured and losing everything, because of this. It's not there's no victimless wars, I guess you'd say.
Yeah. So again, are these the kind of values, if our fingers are into this, and we'll go into some more stuff here to try to prove that our fingers are into it, are these the type of values that we want our public servants and government to be forcing on the world? I'm not saying, there might have been really valid reasons to go after all these countries. I mean, I'm not omnipresent or omnipotent, but they were never really discussed publicly if this is our fingers and everything. So I'd like to have that discussion before this stuff goes on further. Anyway, let me talk a little bit about, the organic fighters. Oh, go ahead, unless you have a comment there. Throw it in.
No, I'm good.
Okay, sorry. All right, so, again, if this was a PSYOP, there would be a military component and, a covert military assistance type components to all these Arab Spring movements that have turned more militaristic, and we see lots of evidence for that. Here's a couple articles. Using foreign mercs, Western contractors, and spooks to wage jihad. Pentagon Islamic advisor reappears as, that was I think I mentioned that article before.
Yeah.
Blackwater training FSA for Syrian action. There's a bunch of articles in the notes. For time, I'll just kind of hint at them and people can research them. But there's been big evidence that there's one in the notes where British Special Air Service guys, their commandos, their Delta Force was stacked on the borders, I think in Jordan with Syria, ready to impose a no-fly zone as early as 2011. recent article came up that I saw on Twitter and retweeted was something about rebels being captured in Syria that had restricted military equipment that couldn't be exported, like the newer generation of night vision goggles and that type of thing, yet somehow all these organic rebels fighting for the cause had them. And here's just a great picture, and this is in the notes. It's two pictures, one above the other, and it has a Syrian army, and it has all these guys that are Syrians that are in an army unit, and then it has the Syrian rebels, and there's a picture of some dude from Africa, unknown country, a dude from Saudi Arabia, a Chechen, an Egyptian, a Libyan, a Turk, an Afghani. There's a guy that with a BDU hat on, American military hat. That doesn't mean he's American military, but interestingly enough, he's got his face covered. So I'm thinking that at least in Syria, much of the rebel activity is absolutely not organic. It is absolutely trained. I mean, there's plenty of links and evidence. It doesn't take a lot of research. Trained, financed. Bush started financing the overthrow of Assad in 2005. The Brits kicked in. They actually doubled their financing for it recently. As far as the chemical weapon attack goes, I guess the story is the Brits almost killed Assad once. They had a bunch of their SAS guys lead a bunch of Al-Qaeda, essentially, and we'll get into that in a second, up the middle, and they almost got Assad, but they were beaten back, and then I guess a new offensive just kicked off, and supposedly, I don't know what I really think about the chemical attack other than I think it absolutely did happen, but I don't know who did it.
You kind of alluded to it, but is there any hard evidence that are we giving them the weapons that they're using?
Well, they're getting them. I think I do have articles in the notes talking about U.S. financing and giving equipment to the rebels.
I mean, that definitely be, the end all red flag is if people know for a fact that they're getting and receiving either U.S. or UN or not UN, but Western supplied weaponry. I'm pretty sure I've heard that we have. I just want to see if you knew any hard evidence or any links like that.
In the notes, I can't find it right now, but I know there's one link that talks about at least CIA contractors, Blackwater, training Syrian mercenaries. I don't know if I put them in the notes or not, but I do have links talking about how the Brits and the Jordanians and even the Israelis commandos are active in the region and have provided training. And I think there is a link somewhere, I wish I could find it in here, talking about financing of the rebels and then them getting this restricted military equipment now that is allegedly only for the U.S. military. So I don't know if it's 100% smoking gun, but in my eyes, at least, it's a 99% smoking gun. I think the evidence is overwhelming that we are taking Al-Qaeda, which is interesting because we have Al-Qaeda that are the bad guys in Afghanistan killing American troops, but they're the good guys that we train in Syria, which again brings up a bunch of red flags. Anyway, I rambled on enough. Comments?
I mean, I think you're covering it pretty good. Now, this is definitely a side note and everything, but didn't we give funds and arms and everything to Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan back in the 80s when they were fighting the Russians?
Yes, we did. So I guess they're good guys or bad guys, just depending on where they are at in the world.
I mean, it kind of sounds like I can't think of Big Brother, the book 1984.
Yeah, like where today Eurasia's bad and Oceania's good, and then tomorrow they rewrite history where Eurasia's bad or good and Oceania's bad. Yep. It's totally like that.
It sounds just like that, doesn't it?
Yep. So just to recap, we have NGO, non-government organizations training, and we talked about this at the beginning of the show, training activists and then returning them to their host countries, and then all of a sudden all these movements start. We have elites, Western elites, being pushed into positions of prominence in these countries. We have U.S. and other NATO countries training when things start getting hot, more militaristic. They're training the rebels and providing finances for them. Often these rebels aren't even, and especially in the Syrian case, even rebels that are from the country that they're fighting in. They're all foreigners. It's just really interesting. I think in Syria's case, we really wanted to go in there sooner, but the Russians have been playing us hard. I went through a bunch of links on Libya. This is just kind of a side note. But the Russians are constantly doing things like, oh, we're moving a bunch of ships in. And then they turn around and say, no, we're moving them out. Oh, we're putting a bunch of troops in their one fort that they have in Syria. No, we took them all out. We're going to give S-300 anti-aircraft missiles. No, we're not. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that was the last thing I heard. They were going to give them the missiles, and then they said that it was going to be delayed a couple months because of a filing paperwork issue or something like that.
Yeah, and then they were going to, and then the Russian equivalent of their defense secretary came out. We're going to protect Syria and Iran militarily if the U.S. intervenes. And then a couple weeks later it comes out, a statement's made, well, the Russians aren't necessarily tied to defending Syria and Iran if military action happens. I think what the Russians are doing, people forget, and this is a little hidden factoid, that after 9/11, after we invaded Iraq, suddenly these oil-rich Alaskan islands got transferred very quietly from U.S. control to Russian control. Did you ever hear anything about that, Michigan Bob?
No, I've never heard anything like that.
Yeah, go ahead and research that. I don't have anything in the notes. Maybe you'll add some. Probably won't, but just Google Alaskan islands given to Russia or something like that. Hopefully you'll find something. But, yeah, so the Russians got something. And I think what they're doing is they're making it difficult. They're holding up this Arab Spring with Syria because they've got interest there. They're constantly toying. They're moving ships into the Mediterranean to try to stir up trouble, and then they back off. So it's hard to tell whether they're coming and going. I think what they're doing is just trying to get as many concessions behind the scenes as they can. But with this recent chemical weapon attack, whether it came from Assad or somebody else trying to make it look like it came from Assad, I think it probably came from Assad. But it's a very convenient timing. The Russians' credibility and their ability to politically delay the plan to get this no-fly zone and start bombing the heck out of Assad, they're losing steam on their ability to do that. But I think they've been playing us and getting all sorts of concessions that we don't know about. Any comments there, Michigan Bob?
What exactly have you heard time-wise of doing anything militarily, officially? I mean, well, I know.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, because I knew Obama said that'd be the red line, the don't cross this line if they use chemical weapons, and that now that they've pretty much proven they have, what's the timeline? Have you heard anything about us going in?
Well, it's interesting. When I was going through a bunch of links, I found one from 2011. I think I talked about it a couple minutes ago about how the Brits were all ready to go back then. But again, because of posturing, they've been delayed. What the latest stuff since this chemical weapon attack, I expected immediately everybody to jump on and go, yeah, he crossed the line, let's go kill him. But there was like this 2-day delay. It was almost like everybody was kind of gauging what everybody else would think, except for the French. They immediately went in and said, oh, yeah, let's blow them up now. But the recent thing is Australians, which are probably going to be involved in all this through NATO, I guess have been meeting with the U.S. on how to do this. I guess there's command centers that have been set up. A month ago, F-16s were moved into Jordan and other air assets were put into the region. And I guess now the ships are being moved. I guess there's 2 destroyers that are full of cruise missiles that are being moved in closer to Libya. So is this go time? Is it going to be in the next 10 or 15 days? I don't know for sure, but I'd say we're much closer to it than any other time. And it kind of depends. I'd think if you see a lot of people all of a sudden stepping up and going, yeah, we need to do something, I'd expect it to happen pretty soon.
I'm almost convinced that we're not going to do anything. I mean, that's kind of been the it seems like they've been putting it off, at least from my perspective. I obviously I'm not as connected online doing all the research like yourself, but I just, it seems to me like they've been trying to avoid going in, and I'd almost say that they're going to come up with another excuse as to why, we can't prove it and we can't go in, we can't afford another war, and so on and so forth. I mean, that's just the way I look at it. Is I don't think we are going to go in.
I disagree, but I think that your logic for having that conclusion is absolutely fine. Like you said, it seems like we've been kind of playing around with going in but haven't done it. Obama says this is the big red line. They crossed it for sure this time. They've actually used chemical weapons before this too, and nothing. They're going to have a UN investigation. So I think that they might actually do something this time, but your conclusion that they aren't and they're going to come up with an excuse not to is perfectly legitimate. So, interesting. So let's wrap it up. The Arab Spring. If you look at the notes, I tried to put together a not 100% compelling, but at least somewhat compelling that the U.S. and other NATO powers have been involved in the Arab Spring from the get-go, that this is actually what Wesley Clark was talking about, to do a bunch of regime changes. And so we have another guest. Welcome. We're up to 4, yay. So we looked at the NGO component, how non-government organizations had trained a bunch of activists, then turned them loose into all these societies, and immediately, the match is lit, and all these protests and regime changes start happening. We see our military through contractors and special forces training a lot of the rebels that went into Libya and then are going into Syria now. We see elites that are the favorites of the UN and kind of the Western establishment, like El-Barabi being thrust into positions of prominence. We see funding. Now let's talk real quick a little bit about blowback, and then we'll wrap up. We talked a little bit already about the Russians, but also there's other blowback happening. A Russian general was killed while advising Assad. This happened, I think, actually a year or two ago. But as these little things come up, we're going to see other great powers like Russia and Iran step in and try to frustrate whatever plan is going on even more. What do you think about that, Michigan Bob, or anybody in the chat?
I can definitely see them trying to throw a wrench in the works and trying to goof everything up. Like you said, it seems like especially Russia has been trying to, posture as in, if you do something, we'll do something, and so forth and so on. But again, if you want to go big time conspiracy theory, maybe they're all part of it, and they're just trying to posture to show that that they would do something, but that maybe they won't.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they won't. I don't think Putin's going to go to nuclear war with us over Syria. But go ahead.
That's definitely I was going to say that's definitely an interesting thing. Is anybody going to use either a quote unquote dirty bomb or a nuclear missile? Is any of the big players involved in this? Are they willing to do that?
What kind of scenario do you think would happen where that would be a possibility? Like, what do you think could trigger that?
Again, depends on who's going to be launching it. I mean, for us to do it, I'd almost say I don't have faith in our government to take that big step. At least now with Obama, I might be totally wrong, but it seems like he doesn't have that type of mentality, I guess you'd say. I don't think anything would happen where he would finally, say, okay, we're going to launch ours. But I can definitely see some of the other rogue nations, I guess you'd call them. I don't think they'd hesitate for even the smallest issue to go ahead and launch a nuclear missile. Or, like I said, I'd be more apt to believe that they'd use a quote-unquote dirty bomb, or, a smaller one with that kind of acts like a nuclear weapon but doesn't have the same mass fallout.
Interesting you should bring all that up, because there is an interesting Bible prophecy in Isaiah 17:1 that talks about Damascus no longer being a city in a heap of ruins. You ever heard that one before?
Yes, sir.
This scenario could very well lead to that type of thing happening. People are bringing up the Psalm 83 war, which I need to look at again. That's about as far as I can go with it. But I could see a scenario, and this is very troubling. Supposedly what happened with the latest chemical attack, Debka, which is an arm of Israeli intelligence that tries to influence Western people, they put out a link, and they told, if you believe them, what even the artillery unit that Assad used to attack the rebels with his chemical weapons. And supposedly they launched a bunch of chemical weapons at this one area where the rebels were at, and then they fired some non-chemical weapons over in Israel, almost like a sign saying, we think you guys, or at least this is how I'm interpreting it, we think you guys are into this as far as attacking or destabilizing our government. And it's almost like Assad and his brother saying, if you kill us, we might chem weapon you. And that would be the one scenario where I could see where the second sarin gas touches down in an Israeli city, Israel's got 300 plus nuclear weapons, and I wouldn't put it past them to immediately nuke the chemical weapons sites and maybe take out Damascus. So we can see that a scenario could develop maybe even in the next week where you have Bible fulfillment of Isaiah 17:1. Any comments there?
It definitely be interesting to see how this all goes, and I would not think twice about Israel's commitment to defending itself. I mean, I think they've proven time and time again that they are willing to do whatever it takes to defend themselves, and it'd be interesting to see if they do launch one or two or all of them, if they go ahead and strike everybody that they want to strike.
Yeah, and then you tie it in with Psalm 83, which I guess is a larger war, which could, again, I haven't looked at this really in depth, so I don't know, but some people interpret some of the names in that psalm to be parts of Iran, and I think it talks about how the population there being scattered. So this could turn into the first phase of the larger war that people have been talking about, not Armageddon, but something that comes before the establishment of like the Antichrist, if you want to go deep into Bible prophecy and stuff, which no one really truly understands because it's still being opened kind of before our eyes. So there's a lot of speculation there, but some people stretch it out to say, hey, this could start off a nuclear war where Syria gets popped and then Iran does something. By the way, there's thousands of Iranian Republican guards streaming into Syria to fight off the foreign rebels. That was part of the blowback I was going to talk about. So that's interesting too. This is almost becoming like a war by proxy between Iran and the West in Syria. So yeah, it's pretty wild stuff. What do you think?
It's definitely interesting. Like you said, if you definitely go from a Bible prophecy standpoint and what people kind of think different verses mean, different states mentioned in prophecy, it definitely could lead to something not too good. Yeah.
So that leads us to, I guess, a good final way to kind of wrap up. Christians out there, I think you need to be praying for the peace of Jerusalem, peace of Syria, peace of America, just that this whole Arab Spring thing would ultimately end up in something good, that that were oppressed really do get freedom, and that regardless of what the motives were, the players involved, that would be the end result. Again, Michigan Bob and myself talking about the possibility of nuclear war that could spiral. There's even Bible prophecies, not to use the fear motive, but I'll go ahead and use the fear motive, about fire raining down on the coastlands. Forget where that is, but Israel didn't really have an understanding of what, continents were. So, a Bible prophecy guy back then might call distant lands islands and coastlands, and talking about how in Bible prophecy, fire raining down on the coastlands could be fire raining down on continents. And so something to think about. So if, I'm not saying you're going to die in a nuclear war tomorrow. I'd say the chances of that are pretty slim. But one day you will die and you will meet your maker. And Michigan Bob, what do you think people should do about that?
I think that people need to basically examine their lives and see if they meet a certain standard, and not the human standard, but God's laws, and to see where they actually meet God's expectation. And in the Bible, it says that we're all sinners, we're all born sinners, and that the wages of sin is death. And Christians, the death that's talking about is eternal separation from Jesus Christ, and that there are consequences to sins that happen on this earth, and how you live your life, you will be accounted for. And basically the only way to have those sins forgiven is to come to an acceptance of Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior, and the belief that He died on the cross for your sins, and that He took that punishment away from you so you don't have to suffer that consequence. You don't have to be separated from Him. All you have to do is have faith and trust in Jesus.
Well said. So if you're out there and you don't know Jesus, please consider putting your faith in Him, that He died for your sins. Be willing to trust Him, that He paid the entire debt. Let Him into your life, and let Him start changing you to be more like Him. And I don't think you have to fear eternity after that. You're forever saved, and whatever happens in this world, you don't have to worry so much. And also, you have a restored relationship with God. And in these times, God's looking for heroes. Maybe the next hero could be you. So get that relationship established and ask God how He would use you, and you might be surprised. It's a time to do great things, I think. So, Michigan Bob, I can't talk tonight, dang it. Any final thoughts?
Like you said, I think the biggest thing is that no matter what's going to happen, I mean, we do have to worry about the future, but in some respects, as a Christian, I know that I have hope and faith that, it doesn't really matter what happens here. We have an eternity to look forward to, and I do believe we're going to go through some hard times, but no matter what, as long as you have your personal faith in Jesus, you're set. You know what's going to happen in the long run. So it does give you a certain peace and joy and happiness to know where you're going to spend eternity, and that it doesn't really matter what happens here. And all the conspiracy theories and everything else don't really matter much in the long run.
I would agree. Michigan Bob, give your email address so people can contact you if they have questions about that.
Email address is michiganbob333@gmail.com.
And mine's radioinfoside@gmail.com. Infoside spelled INFOCYDE. So thanks for listening to the show. Hopefully it's been informative, and please join us again next week. Michigan Bob, you've got a topic that we're going to talk about probably next week. Why don't you throw that topic out there?
I do believe we are going to be talking about the HARP weapons and weather control, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So that should be very interesting. I still want to do a show on Common Core education. I'm dragging my feet on the research on that one. So we'll circle back around for that in a couple weeks. So those are some of the topics we're going to take on. Thanks again for listening, and take care. And that'll wrap us up for the night, Michigan Bob.
Excellent.
Okay. You have yourself a good night, sir.
You too.